We're thrilled to have author William Patrick with us to talk about his new book, Metrofix, the Combative Comeback of a Company Town. The book shows what went right and what went wrong when General Electric moved most of its businesses out of Schenectady, New York. Between 1960 and the year 2000, the company town would lose 30,000 residents, and like so many other cities in post-industrial America, faced overwhelming forces that pushed it toward imminent ruin. With historic photos, deeply researched details, and portraits of some of its most dynamic citizens, Metrofix is an inspirational story that shows how hundreds of dedicated citizens pulled their city back from the brink of disaster and did, in fact, change their world. Again, the name of the book is Metrofix, the Combative Comeback of a Company Town, and it's a great pleasure to welcome William Patrick to the Roundtable this morning. How are you?
I'm good. Good morning. How are you?
I'm well. It's really good to see you. I thank you very much for being with us and for coming in. And I said this to you in person, but I will say it on the air as well. This is a striking book. It is very beautifully done.
Thank you. Yeah, we spent a lot of time doing that. We got a wonderful cover photo from Ralph Rosenthal, a local Schenectady photographer who took this great picture of a Schenectady 2000 gala. And it's a handsome book. We decided to go with a little larger trim size and 4-color offset printing and Smythe sewing. And so it's a well-structured book.
Yeah, very, very nice. So at what point did you start to take on this project?
About 4 years ago. Mona Golub called me. We're friends. And she said, how busy are you? Would you consider doing a memoir with my dad? And I said, well, busy, but sure, let's go talk to him. Mm-hmm. And we went and talked to him, and Neil said, nope, I don't want a book about me. I don't want a book about Price Chopper. I don't want any of that. I care about one thing, the economic revitalization of Schenectady. I said, well, Neil, that's, it was 2017 at that point, and everything was firing on all cylinders in Schenectady before COVID. And I said, that's a Village of the Happy People book, Neil. Everybody wants to live in that city. Nobody wants to read about that city. I said, if you want me to do a book that's, shows all the warts, how did it fall into great decline? What happened? How did it build itself back? What did Schenectady 2000 do? How did that become Metroplex? And the current state of the city, without leaving out all the hard stuff. I said, I'd be interested in doing that. And he said, all right, go ahead.
So what is it? I have a couple of questions. One, Price Chopper, GE and Price Chopper are two major parts of the story, aren't they?
Not Price Chopper so much. GE is a very major part of the story.
Yeah. But as far as the city itself and its of how it even came back, right?
Well, Neil Golub.
Yes.
Very much. Yeah, I don't think Price Chopper, although it's, of course, a major employer and a force in the city, but Neil Golub, he really underwrote this entire book and was a partner in the sense that he was there the whole time. As I finished a chapter, I would show it to him. He would give me notes. He would give me edits. We talked about it all the way through, sometimes not without some rancor, but, to be fair, here's this guy who's paying for a book, right? And there's no book. So as he sees little parts of it, he's probably thinking, well, this isn't a book yet. How's this going to work?
So, you spoke of this at the very beginning, but of what you wanted the book to be. And as we say, we look at the story between 1960 and 2000. And so where do you begin on that, of look at what the city was and then where it went to and then how it got better?
Well, that's a perfect question because I had no idea when I started this. I'm not native to Schenectady. I grew up in Troy and then lived all over the country. Didn't come back until the mid-'90s to do a book called Saving Troy. And there's real similarity there. Saving Troy was about a year and a half I spent with the firefighters of the 1st Platoon in Troy. I knew nothing about firefighting. And so as I rode with them for that year and a half, the story developed. Kind of the same thing here. I really didn't know much about Schenectady. I've lived there for about 10 years, but definite outsider. And so as I interviewed people, and I ended up interviewing 107 people for this book, the story developed very, very slowly. For 2.5, almost 3 years, I really didn't know where it was going. And so I didn't know the beginning. I didn't know where it should go. I had no through line, no narrative through line. I had no structure for it. And so as I interviewed people, things occurred. Really early interview was Angelo Mazzone. And Angelo, in passing, mentioned a fire at his first restaurant, Peggy's Canalside Restaurant, which was in Canal Square. And to Angelo, it didn't mean much. He just kept moving because, frankly, he's done so many things. He's got a catering empire, lots of restaurants since. And I said, Angelo, wait a minute. Whoa, what fire are we talking about here? And he said, 1987, in July, we had a big fire. It ruined the whole restaurant. It ruined several buildings in Canal Square. And it was one of those aha moments. When he said it, I thought, that's the beginning of the book. That's a low point. Canal Square was a low point to begin with. It was an urban mall that they worked very hard to make, but it didn't work. And the fire was just kind of the topping. It's like, we got this thing that's not working, and now it's burning. And I thought, that's a good dramatic opening for that book. And all along, I looked to interviews and research to basically show me those points that would establish points on the narrative through line for this. And really, it was only about a year ago that I kind of figured it out.
When you figured it out, do you see that through line mirrors in some way a date line of when GE starts to pull away little by little by little by little, and sometimes much larger than that?
Yeah, sometimes a lot.
A lot out of the city.
Yeah, well, that's Schenectady is a representative city in the Rust Belt. Janesville, Wisconsin, Flint, Michigan. There are all kinds of towns you can find that went through the same thing. A fair reliance on a very large corporation, in Schenectady's case, General Electric. And deindustrialization started really in the mid-'50s. People don't talk about it that much, but mid-'50s to mid-'60s, a lot of large corporations started to either move their businesses to other parts of the country or globally, they started to deindustrialize too. At the same time, the interstate highway system in the 50s made it really easy to move. People just could go wherever they wanted to, and so people started going to the suburbs. And some of it's related, some of it isn't. So GE lays off people, let's say it's mid-'60s, they start laying off people for various reasons. Those people say, well, I don't have a job anymore. I think I'll go somewhere else. Alco in 1969, the American Locomotive Company, which had employed a lot of people, 12,000 people, they went belly up in 69. So there's another 12,000 employees from the county and the region who have to go somewhere else or find another job. So between all of that movement to the suburbs and the cities emptying out and retail going to the new malls in the mid-'60s, early '70s, cities just lost population. Happened all across the Rust Belt.
Where did the title Metrofix come?
It's just really kind of a play on Metroplex. It just occurred to me that, what they were trying to do was fix the city. Schenectady 2000, which was begun by Roger Hull, Neil Golub, George Robertson, they all were trying to fix the city in some way. In their case, it was physical. Let's get volunteers, and they ended up with 800 volunteers on 14 committees, and they painted bridges, they planted trees, they fixed things. And I just thought, yeah, that's what all these people have been trying to do all along in Schenectady, is fix a metropolitan area, clearly a smaller metropolitan area, but it is a Metrofix. Let's fix this town up. And it's been a communal effort.
Philip Morris comes in the scene around, 2002?
2002 he showed up, yeah.
Yeah. And really had vision as to what he wanted the arts community to be in that downtown section.
He did. But when he arrived, there was nothing there.
Right.
I mean, there was a sub shop across the street. That was it.
And a hollowed out Carl Company building.
Yeah, the Carl Company was in tough shape. Even the $2 stores on State Street had closed. There was nothing there.
Yeah.
And they were demolishing buildings, and they were ripping up the whole street. All of State Street was being reworked at that time.
So how did he then play into the hands, the work that was already going on as far as the fix?
Well, he did a bunch of things first while he was trying to get his feet wet, which tended to be small but have turned out to be big. One was the ambassador program that he established with Mike Sicoscio, where they started to sort of employ homeless people to be ambassadors in the city, and that's grown into a really big program. he realized that they need new utilities at Proctor's. So there's a whole initiative that puts heating under the streets, under the sidewalks, and supplies utilities, electricity to the other buildings in the area. But the big thing was the Phantom of the Opera push. Phantom of the Opera around 2004, 2005 was playing in the big cities, Toronto, London, New York City. But smaller cities couldn't get it because the demands of the production were huge. And so Philip realized we're not going to be able to compete in the world of entertainment and arts if we don't expand. And so 2005 to 2006, they did a major expansion, $43 million expansion, and in the process became a place to tech new Broadway shows. So then Phantom of the Opera came in, Mamma Mia came in, Wicked came in, and all of a sudden people said, wow, look at Proctor's. It's expanded. It's new. We can go. We don't have to go spend $300 for a ticket in New York. We can go to Schenectady and see the same shows.
And that, of course, had a dramatic impact on downtown, of what we consider to be downtown.
Huge. Yeah, because along with the entertainment came the need for restaurants, bars, retail, and so everybody started opening up. Yeah, that was a really big deal, the Phantom of the Opera push.
William Patrick is our guest. He is the author of the new book, Metrofix, The Combative Comeback of a Company Town. The Schenectady Historical Society, Stockade Association, and the Schenectady Heritage Foundation are having an event. It's a holiday book reading of Metrofix. It takes place tomorrow night, 4 to 6, and it's at the Stockade Inn on Church Street in Schenectady. You can find out more by going to metrofixbook.com about that event, and we'll mention that again at the end of our time together. So when it comes to to that part of the fix, then we see, you also go to the opportunity that was statewide for casinos to come in. Was there a concern that would screw things up?
Oh yeah, there was, and I cover this pretty extensively in the book. Right. There were a lot of people who didn't want the casino, and a lot of people who did for various reasons. And it was the old Alco site, which was really on both sides of Erie Boulevard. But the largest portion was 60 acres along the Mohawk River, right, which is, of course, now Mohawk Harbor. But that was a major brownfield. And what had happened is when George Robertson was economic development czar of Schenectady, which he was... He came in the late 80s, as I remember, and was there until early 2000s. So Metroplex came in 1998, but didn't really get on its feet for a couple of years, and really didn't become as effective as it has been until 2004 when Ray Gillen showed up to lead the project. But George basically gave a lot away, and so there's a company called STS Steel, which sits at the front of the site along Erie Boulevard. And George, at the time, gave them a 40-year lease at a very, very low price. So they're there. And lots of developers who showed up to look at the site thought, well, God, I'm stuck with this. I'm stuck with this huge, product in front of me. I mean, lots of rusting I-beams are sitting right there along Erie Boulevard. And so Dave Bucco, he had some vision for this. The Gillespie Group has been involved early on. They've been involved for 25, 30 years. Even earlier than that, the Gillespie brothers got involved with sites in Rotterdam and other places early on, the late 60s, early 70s. So Dave Bucco looked at it and said, I can do something here. And really was developing the site before they had the casino. So the casino idea came along when Cuomo wanted to grant those licenses. Right. Schenectady was able to go through that process and win that license, but there were plenty of people who didn't want to come. Plenty of people.
Rob, just so you know, I'm going to work through the news here, and then I'll come out about 33 or so. So my fascination too in that is that the brilliance of it seems to be that it almost creates. And people may get mad at me about that. If I'm using the wrong terminology, I apologize. But it almost creates two different cities, doesn't it? I mean, you have the downtown, and then you have that sector. And so they can come together but they also can be separate if you want them to be, right?
They are, and I think that's a bone of contention. I think there's some controversy surrounding that. But there are also a lot of efforts, I think, to link the areas. And Erie Boulevard, a lot of expansion on Erie Boulevard, that's making it, making it feel like one city. I mean, you got to remember, Schenectady is not a huge city. I've lived there for 11 years, and I say everything's 5 minutes away in Schenectady. That's one of its charms, right? So if you're at Proctor's, it's really not that far to Mohawk Harbor.
Not at all.
And the same, So if you go to Mohawk Harbor and you're staying at the Landing Hotel and you decide you want to see a show, it's no big deal to go over to Proctor's and see that show or eat at a downtown restaurant.
I do want to get, we are running out of time, but I also want to get to this idea of, how the college also, the college community, and how it brings in that audience as well.
Which audience do you mean?
Well, meaning that you have Union College, you have a college right in, you have Schenectady County Community College as well, but you have the colleges there, and it's also a college town, and that plays into it too, doesn't it?
Big time. Yeah. Roger Hull, when he was president, initiated a whole freshman day when Schenectady 2000 was happening, where literally hundreds of Union College students would go out and they'd pick up trash and paint bridges and help with landscaping. So Union College has been involved for all along. I was talking to David Harris the other day because they've asked me to be a speaker at Founders Day, and he was outlining some of the efforts, one of the guys on the hockey team is raising funds for Will Revis's Cocoa House, and Union College students have been involved in Cocoa House for a long time. So people talk about town gown separation. I don't think it's been very pronounced in Schenectady. I think Union has always seen itself as part of the city and has tried to get its college students involved.
Last question. The subtitle of the book, The Combative Comeback of a Company Town. Will it always have to combat the forces?
That's a good question. There are lots of ways to look at combat, right? It's a nuanced word. There was literal combat in political terms. There was literal combat in terms of all the strikes against GE and the retaliations by GE against the strikers. You could see the layoffs as a kind of violent combat as well. I mean, I don't think Jack Welch particularly disliked Schenectady, but he did like profits. And so, one of the things he wanted to do was make a lot of money. And the way to do that is get rid of the people who are causing trouble, the unions, and diversify, move your businesses out. But there's also, depending on where you live in Schenectady, you feel like your voice hasn't been heard sufficiently. So there's a kind of economic activism that's been occurring for a long time, and that's also a form of combat. I don't think that's going to go away either. But I would like to see, and I'm hoping that the last chapter of this book actually inspires some people, I'd like to see the community aspect of this played up a little bit more, because there are philanthropists, foundations, city volunteers. It's a city that has always stepped up to help itself, whether they wanted to save Proctor's or whether they wanted to rebuild the neighborhoods. It's always stepped up. And so there are movers and shakers, clearly, Metrofix, Schenectady 2000, et cetera, the philanthropists. But there are also hundreds of people who are working really hard to improve that city. That's not true in every Rust Belt city.
The name of the book is Metrofix, The Combative Comeback of a Company Town. William Patrick is the author. A reminder that there will be a reading and signing of the book tomorrow night from 4 to 6 at the Stockade Inn on Church Street. And you can find out more by going, find more about the event, find more about the book, by going to metrofixbook.com. William, a great pleasure to have you on the program. Thank you very much for being with us.
Thank you, Joe. I really enjoyed it.
I appreciate it. You're listening to The Roundtable on WAMC.